Hello, hello.
Hi, Rohan. What's the etiquette for interim meetings? More cameras than for remote participants, huh?
I'm greeting people because there are so few people here.
Yeah.
I know I'm a little nervous. I feel like it's worth waiting a little bit.
Yes.
I did just get the Notewell slides uploaded though.
Well, I was about to present the slide 3 and slide 4 from IETF 123. So
Which should work, of course. But yeah, I just downloaded the template and it's like, that's really all we need.
yeah. All right. All right. Well, I will turn off my video for a while. Okay. Michael Richardson. We're going to wait, let's say, till 5 after. We can go over the document. All right, Tommy, it's 5 after. Do you want to take it away? You want me to take it away?
Yeah, go for it. All right. Thank you everyone for coming to the DIEM meeting. The entire agenda today is to go that the co-authors, lots of work in. Thank you. Before we get to that, as the Notewell, well, governed briefly do here. Oh, I am cutting in and out. Rohan, do you want to take this rather than make everyone wait on my AV debugging?
Sure. Okay, so welcome. So just a reminder, this is a regular, this is an interim meeting, and so all the regular process rules apply. Everyone here is familiar with the note well. So please keep in mind everything here, and on this next slide, did you take over the, yeah. Tommy, can you advance, please? I think you have control of the slides.
I don't think so, but let me try.
The chair can take control back.
Yeah, you don't have the second slide on here, do you?
Probably. I mean, I pulled from the chills, so.
Okay. All right. Well, the note really well slide basically says, please treat everyone with respect. And there is if you think that that is not happening, that there are a variety of people that you can communicate with, including the ONSPUD team. Today's agenda is going to be to go over the document that has been jointly edited primarily by Rahel and Felix. And can we get a note taker, please?
This is Bill. I will, if you like.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Tommy is sharing. Yes, here is the note really well. Everybody should have seen this before. Everybody here has been to IETF meetings. What we're going to do right now is we will share the editor's copy of the document and let people look through it, and then we can look at we can get some sort of overall feedback on it, and then look at any PRs or issues that are on that repo. Is there any agenda bashing? Does anybody want to suggest something else? And there is the GitHub repo as well. GitHub repo is here. Oh yeah, thanks Tommy, just beat me to it. All right, hearing no objections. Tommy, do you want to share? How about you share the editor's copy of from the repo, and we walk through it a little bit. And Rahel or Felix, do either of you want to sort of walk through that document?
Okay, I can jump in to start. So the general idea of this document was to, as a beginning point, get a structure for what we wanted to include. It was also to kind of list out use cases that we planned on including. So it's not necessarily a comprehensive list, but it was a list of the use cases that we had discussed, either because they'd been in one of the previous two drafts before we combined, or because it was included in the presentation. So with that, the intent was also to kind of give a framework for how we envisioned like what guidelines we'd want to set forward for what each set of, like, let me think about how to phrase this, how the excuse me, like what kind of broad requirements would be needed for like talking about general requirements of what a what each specification or use case would need to adhere to, just like that general framework. I think beyond that, I would defer to Felix to talk about what his intent was in writing this as well.
Okay, thanks for handing over, Rahel, and thanks for the introduction. So I'm just going to sketch what, yeah, as Rahel said, was my intention was. I don't want to speak on all the co-authors' behalf, but I think we came up with a good document here. In the last working group meeting in Madrid, we had this discussion of where we draw the line on use cases. And naturally, this led to a lot of contention, and the new document structure the document itself was an attempt to maybe avoid that conflict and find a more constructive approach. So this use cases and requirements document is now a requirements first document. So you see in the sections we have first section, the first real section is the requirements, then we have some extensions, then we have use cases. And the intention behind the requirements section is to list the requirements that we're going to address with the DIEM architecture within the initial scope. Then later, as the section suggests, we present extensions, and then finally we discuss use cases. And in the use case discussion, we highlight how these, or the document is not quite there yet in section 5, I would say, but my intention is to ultimately highlight how use cases can benefit from a DIEM architecture and fit into a DIEM architecture that provides the requirements listed in section 3. Different use cases have different requirements. They may use the standards that come out of the working group differently, but yeah, there will be the DIEM architecture with the requirements discussed in the beginning. So let me close with some quick notes on why I think that this approach is nice and can help us make progress. It allows us, by having a list of requirements limited to what we'll address within the initial scope, we have a way to clearly determine when work that the working group will do is finished and adequate. So we don't run to loopholing on things that may not be addressable initially anyways. This approach still, while putting requirements in focus and use cases rather to the end, still allows us to gather stakeholder input, whether they believe that the architecture addressing these requirements could benefit them. Yeah, does it match their understanding of the use case? Is this something they could see them use? There we might want to group very similar use cases more together. As I said, section 5 is not clearly there yet. And also, maybe as a closing remark, by saying, look, we're going to work on these requirements, and this is definitely what we're going to do. With some flexibility, you will see that some of the requirements that we're going to address with the DIEM architecture are still phrased in a way that not every use case will need to, let's say, use them or has them. So the architecture will have flexibility in that respect. We can still also clearly sketch how future extensions could fit into this. And you see that we have, under other requirements, an explicit extensibility requirement that would allow a working group, for example, to say, look, if we're evaluating decision A compared to decision B, and within the light of the requirements they're equal, then we can, or within the light of the requirements that are not extensibility, they are equal, then we can say, for example, yeah, but it would be more general to go with option A, and therefore let's do it because this will allow for easier extensions in the future. So quickly summarize, the document puts requirements first so that we can determine when work is finished and adequate. We still discuss use cases so that we can gather stakeholder input on whether the requirements actually match reality. And I think that's it. That's why I think that this is a nice use case and requirements document.
Okay, why don't we walk through the individual requirements briefly. Rahel or Felix, why don't you guys walk us through these requirements briefly? Just walk through this, and we can see if we can kind of get some nods or thumbs up in some form, in some media or another.
Got it. Okay. So broadly, the format, we talked about having a general profile. We envision some sort of structure with likely keys and values to denote the different components of a digital emblem. And so this is kind of like the baseline of what they specifically need to include, kind of broadly speaking. So to start, they need to identify their bearer and what type of digital emblem they are. And at this point, we've said that they may include other types of data. Beyond it, it's still a bit general.
Yeah, so I think this is this is a nice, at the sort of the end of each one of these sections, we could maybe even just have a quick pause and see if anybody wants to raise a hand. Okay. Seeing nothing, I would say, just to give like a 20-second pause after each one of the requirements, and we could. And then we can just keep going like that and just see if leaving a sort of a space for anybody that wants to raise a hand and make a comment about one of these requirements.
Absolutely. Okay.
Should I just jump in?
Go ahead.
So I guess I was thinking about this, and I'm kind of more of a implementation and security person. And my understanding is that part of the goal of all of this is to be able to identify things such that willing compliant parties will not attack them. Yet,
Right.
if you're sharing an IP address with some other property and that other property gets attacked, then you still go down.
Right.
So while I think that the fully qualified domain name must be identified, I actually don't think that's very useful in the end of the day. I think the IP addresses have to be identified. And in fact, I think that probably leads to a better solution overall. And I don't know if that goes in this part or not, but also I guess we haven't adopted this document yet. Is that true? And I don't know why we haven't yet.
I think we haven't formally, is my understanding.
Yeah, we haven't adopted this document. The intention here is this is a candidate for adoption, and we're presenting this to folks on the call and see if we can get a kernel of folks that will support it, that want to support it in an adoption call on the mailing list.
Michael, does that answer your question?
On the adoption call, I would have just adopted it already, but I'm more interested in the question about IP addresses and you know, what it is we're trying to protect and from what. Yeah,
that makes sense. I can say that the listing of the fully qualified domain name was largely based on the charter. I am not sure. I don't believe that we have anything against listing an IP address. In fact, in some cases, I think it would make sense to also co-identify that. We do later talk about, I believe, sort of a bridging mechanism so that identifying an asset, as we're calling it, by something else that might be more natural would be a way through which it could also be searchable. That would bridge between searching by fully qualified domain name and that other piece, like in this case, IP addresses.
Okay, let's just run through the queue here for a little bit.
Hi, Ori Steele speaking as an individual. I queued actually basically to ask the same question Michael asked, which is like, you know, I know we focused on domain names because we kind of, you know, in the charting process, we're thinking, oh, like this is something the IETF can do a reasonable job at, you know, thinking about technically, and, you know, an FQDN can help you, you know, identify, you know, IP addresses that maybe, you know, are under protection through their relationship to the FQDN. But I wanted to ask, like, have we gotten feedback on this use cases document from, you know, cyber operators who are saying, well, you know, this if the FQDN were to be the bearer of the emblem, it wouldn't cover the assets that we're interested in. So that's my question. Mm-hmm. Have we gotten feedback on whether this FQDN is not a suitable conveyance mechanism to cover assets that those folks are interested in? Thanks.
I have not seen any feedback either to or against that. So whether that would be the main means of conveyance. Overall, we saw pretty limited feedback overall from the mailing list on the just the, I'm sorry, I'm being really, on that question in general, so.
Chairs, I hope it's okay if I jump in here too. It's a bit, we don't have this,
Yeah.
like there's no mic that Rahel and I, for example, stand in front of where it would be natural to hand the word over to one another. Or to answer your question, I think there are two parts to your answer. We haven't circulated this draft outside the mailing list. And beyond the feedback we got on the mailing list, we received none. As part of the year-long development and research that we did together with the ICRC, we Samit is unfortunately not here. He could say this better. Like, they have engaged with, for example, I think cyber commands of different countries, and we have received solid feedback that domain names is something that makes sense to label. Now, the question of IP addresses, I think this is like now hidden a bit in this requirement 3.1.2 emblem semantics. If we label a fully qualified domain name, and we will have to say later what this putting the emblem on this FQDN means, right? So we could say everything that every IP address that is in an A or AAA record is now protected. Just for example, yeah, you could also define it differently and just talk abstractly more about services. Does that answer your question, Ori? So I think in the timeline that, well, yeah, maybe one more addition. Sorry, I think the timeline of this draft in my head, and maybe that's not ideal, was, let's think about this draft, think about the requirements we're going to address, think about how this fits the use cases, adopt it so that we can then go to different stakeholders too and say, look, this is what we adopted, this is how we think this fits your use case, to get an idea of whether this matches reality, the list of requirements match reality, so that before a working group last call or similar, maybe I'm misusing terminology, I'm not that familiar with it yet, we can say, okay, now this draft has been adopted for a while. We on use case X, we have certainty Y that this actually matches reality. Now, is this something we want to keep working on? Does this need refinement, etc.? Does that make sense? I see you responding in chat.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, responding to the previous speakers, there is no actual problem to address here because that is the entire point of the inatter.arpa space and the IP6.arpa space. IP addresses are 100% encompassed within the scope of FQDNs. We don't need to do anything special. No recharter is needed. This is a solved problem.
Python?
Respectfully, Bill, it's not a solved problem because the reverse maps are often very, very hard for anybody to update. Extensive experience with this, if they're maintained at all. And I think very, very, very much there needs to be a way to map back again. And I actually think that probably requires a different, a reverse map-ish type of thing, but not run by through the layering of ISPs and RARs, etc. But that's something which the relevant, sorry, I don't know what the word is, properties I wanted to say, but I think we have a different term. The bearers would need to be able to more directly update. I don't think it's a hard problem, but I think there is an operational requirement that we need to spec out, probably not in the use cases, but probably that needs to go into the document, that what it is, what we're protecting that way. I mean, just as an example, right? If somebody goes and outsources their email to some provider, well, that's no longer in that zone, right? That's no longer that FQDN, it's whatever thing. And yet, if you attack that provider, the bearer goes down, right? So I don't know how to deal with that, you know, in a thing, but I really think that to this be effective, it needs to be something where people can really understand, no, wait, I'm affecting multiple entities and there's collateral damage, and we shouldn't do that.
But my intuition is that this discussion is a bit detached from the use case and requirements draft that we're discussing today, right? I think that, Michael, your discussion is important to have, but maybe not now, question mark? Or do you see it differently?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Hi there. I was just going to say what Felix has just said. I think Michael's getting too heavily diving into some of the operational detail before we've even got as far as getting the use cases and requirements stuck into a mature state. Here, we don't even have it adopted by the working group yet. So I think we need to get back on the use cases that we're really trying to get here and get this document circulated. And I see there's been comments in the chat to get this socialized. And I think that circulation of the document needs to go just beyond the working group, but to other potential interested parties. If only to say, hey, this is what we think the use cases are. Is there anything we've forgotten? Is there anything we've missed? Or has it not been fully prioritized? I think that's important. And to go back at the earlier comment that were being made about whether we use IP addresses or fully qualified domain names. Well, IP addresses can always be represented by fully qualified domain names. And there are all sorts of other internet identifiers that live under .arpa that are used for all sorts of other purposes. And potentially they could actually come under the scope of a digital emblem. I'm thinking of things like universal product codes, RFID tags, and what have you, and all the rest of it. So potentially there's a bigger scope here we can do with fully qualified domain names, but I think we need to be very, very careful when we do that we don't try to encompass everything all at once. And I think we should try to keep very focused on an initial remit, because if we try to incorporate every potential identifier that could or maybe should be incorporated in this, we'll never get anything done because we're too busy focusing on implementation detail to get anything out the door. Tumbleweed.
It sounds like we were pretty much in agreement, so I'd be happy to. I don't think there's a whole lot to add to what you said, Jim. Casey?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts, and these I'll make these quick because the general focus of the group was to really try and just bring things together and to work together with what we had to get consensus on a document that we felt was comfortable enough for everyone to push forward so that we could make progress together. And I think, and by the way, I think both the chairs for their guidance and those who were leading the efforts to do this, Felix and Rahel in particular. So real quick, I'll just comment on two questions that were given. One of them was, or you'd asked about FQDN, FQDN, and if other options were sort of considered. Just briefly, we had talked about, and I mentioned this in the chat, so sorry if it's a little repetitive, but we did talk about like the idea of general URLs, for example, of which you could say an FQDN is sort of a subset, because you could specify to use the DNS for something and even include record type. The consensus was to go back, at least for now, back to the charter document, which specified just FQDN, which is fine. I went with that, but just noting that it actually could be something like a little bit more general, which still could use FQDN, but with URL syntax, and that would expand it to other things. But again, that was what we decided for now, and I'm okay with that. The second thing, in terms of experts, I don't disagree with the idea of engaging the experts for this, but when we talk about experts in the field of what's needed, but also including like the technical application of like how we take these things that we're wanting to do digitally, that's a little hard for them to weigh in on some of the mechanisms. So I don't disagree with the idea of involving the experts, but what I'm saying is there may not be a right or even the necessary knowledge to weigh in on some of these things without knowing intimately the technologies with which we're dealing. So it's sort of a you have to take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, those are just my 2 comments.
Okay, so this is Rowan as an individual. So I'm just going to say that the way I read this was that the bearer needs to have an FQDN identifier, but it does not say that that has to be the only way that the bearer is identified. And since this is what is in the charter scope, this seems sufficiently flexible and open that it could cover what we need for right now.
Yeah. I could also see us putting in some statement to that effect if it would clear up misconception that it may include other identifiers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that we're concerned about is obviously that if it's not in the charter, then people will ask that question. So we may have to be a little delicate, but
Okay.
But yeah, we could easily make that comment. So I think we've exhausted the mic queue. Maybe we can move on to the next requirement here.
Okay. So individual use cases specifying semantics of the emblem. Okay, further. So it has to specify question. Am I waiting for everyone to read, or am I reading aloud or summarizing here?
You can summarize.
Go. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. And sorry, I scrolled too far.
Not a problem. So here we're specifying that use cases have to specify probably in their actual specifications the semantics of the emblem and how and the bearer and how discovery and validation of that type of digital emblem should inform validator behavior. So okay, going on to discovery requirements. That let's kind of some more details. This is 3.2.1. Digital emblems have to specify how validators can check for the presence of a digital emblem. So if, let's see, so bearer has to explain, I'm sorry, I'm gear shifting a little bit here. So, so the validator has to be able to determine whether a certain asset has an emblem. And we're again talking about the FQDN because it's in the charter. So the emblem could, in that example, be associated with the FQDN. Okay. So looking at 322, removability, this is talking about how emblems need to be kind of removable, and we kind of refer to this in some points as like being able to turn it off or on. So here I would also so that's largely based on whether it's present or not. And Felix, I know we had some discussion about the specifics of this. If you want to jump in, that might be helpful.
The specificities of the removable requirement.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think you summarized it well. You know, we have here a small technical discussion in the paragraph regarding the difference between removable and removed emblems and invalid emblems, just to be clear what we mean. But I think the intuition is pretty obvious behind that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Should I continue with the other requirements, Rahel, or do you want to?
You can go ahead. I know that I'm a particularly slow reader, and so my switching between is being especially awkward.
Okay, sure. So yeah, maybe to zoom out a bit, the section 3 has 4 subsections, as you can see, and we were inspired by the charter there, thinking about, okay, well, we're doing digital emblems, so let's define some requirements generally on digital emblems, as Rahel said. What are these in some sense in part of the architecture? Yeah, Rahel?
Felix, do you want to cover undetectable validation?
Yeah, I just wanted to give like some
yeah.
general structure, and then I'll jump into undetectable validation. And now here we are in the section, and in the charter we then say, okay, we want to discover and we want to validate emblems. Yeah, so we have 2 sections on requirements on these, and Rahel guided us through some of them. Now, finally, undetectable validation. This had many names before. Personally, I think this is the clearest. Sometimes it was called covert inspection. Sometimes it was called validator privacy. The idea is for use cases that protect the some target or mark it as please don't attack this target. This must not be detectable too. And here we are a bit more specific than in the past to address IESG feedback. This must not be detectable to the bearers, the issuers, and the authorizers related to the respective digital emblem. The idea is you don't want to alarm a target that you might attack it, especially when it has no emblem. I'll just continue with the other requirements. Whenever you have something to say, disagree, please jump into the queue and then we can go back. I think that then we can go a bit faster. So now to the third big section of requirements, validation requirements. Yeah, we have two big ones there. One, validation should be possible. Again, I think we all have some intuition for what validation means, specified here a bit more technically, and then that authorization may be required by some use cases. Again, with some technical detail, but I think we also have an intuition for that. Other requirements is a section required for completeness, because we have one other requirement which didn't fit either of the boxes. That is the meta requirement I introduced in the beginning, the one of extensibility. We had many discussions on which use cases we might address in the future, which use cases we could be maybe address better. So here we're taking note explicitly that there probably will be extensions in the past while you design the current architecture. Please keep that in mind. Don't be overly specific, just so that, yeah, to keep note that this is something important to us, though we intentionally do not specify what all we should cover to avoid shadow requirements, as Roman suggested in the last IETF meeting. Yeah, that was a quick rundown of the requirements that we will certainly address within the initial scope of the working group, or that we suggest as such. I think now would be a good time to discuss that. Do you think something's missing? Do you think things are phrased badly? We could go over each line, but I think that might not be the best use of all our time. Yeah, so yeah, I have nothing to say. Please jump into the queue if you have.
Yeah, I encourage people to jump in, and again, our goal for the end of this meeting is, do the people on this call think that this is a good start, and should we use this? Should we go ahead and call for adoption on the mailing list based on this, based on support of this current document as a good starting point? Okay, hearing no comments at this point, I'd say we can carry on. Do you want to jump into extensibility or use cases first?
Good question. So yeah, let's go through it as the document is formatted, right? So we have this section on extensions where we quickly sketch how things that have been brought up in the past could be addressed in the future, or maybe even now if you think this document should change. Yeah, just to show, no, not just to show, to keep note of what we have thought of, what we have discussed, and why we think that in architecture as addressing the requirement as written above could be extended to support things that are not supported immediately. We have here new data formats that could be required. There's I think 4.4 and 4.5 have been brought up more. There may be digital emblems that require some sort of confidentiality where not everyone should be able to read the contents. Yes. And in the bearer discovery section, we were thinking about things about use cases where an asset may not have a logical domain name, for example, a pond, right? Yeah, for certain things like ponds, it's not clear which fully qualified domain name you would need to look up, and you may require mechanisms that give you the domain name for such use cases. And then in the use cases section, going to 5, we alphabetically now tried to include all the use cases we could think of that were ever brought up to the working group. I don't want to go through all of them because you have seen them multiple times. All the names in the call here look familiar, so I don't want to bore you with that. As I said earlier, the intention of this section is to invite for feedback, and I'm also not happy with it quite yet. I think we'll need to do a better job potentially grouping use cases up to discuss how they fit into the architecture that is described implicitly by the requirements above, so that the feedback can actually be meaningful. Yeah. I'm personally not sure whether this needs to happen before or after call for adoption. We can discuss this, but that is what the section intends to do and what it must do better in the future. Rahel, you want to say something?
Yeah. I was going to say that I think some of the grouping piece also had to do with discussion about where we use like a top-down approach, looking at the different requirements, or in use cases where we would say, okay, these use cases in concept are all similar, and they therefore would have these types of similar requirements, versus a bottom up where we say like each use case has these different sets of requirements, and based on the overlapping requirements that we identify across use cases, we group them that way. So my hunch is that we're probably going to do some kind of hybrid of the two, but I think that it's worth mentioning that in case in feedback you have any thoughts about which would make the most sense, either for overall or for particular sets of use cases.
Okay, so I guess what I would, we can kind of scroll through the table of contents. Maybe Tommy can scroll the table of contents only on the right side there, so that we can see the list of use cases start to finish. But that's, there are 13 of them. So there are a reasonable number of them. Does anybody here feel that this isn't a representative list, or that there's something crucially missing in the use cases? Okay, because the feedback that we got in the last meeting was that we wanted, any use case that seemed like it was plausibly, could fit in the DIEM framework, even if it had maybe a requirement or two that was not immediately in the charter, but we wanted to hear about what the requirements are, so that it would motivate any other sort of architectural decisions for things like a data formats or what have you. Okay. Tommy, do you think we should do a show of hands at this point for any of these things?
Yes. Specifically, are there objections that would block adoption at this point?
I suppose I should have worded it as that. Do you have objections? Okay, there are 12 people on this call, so it should be pretty easy for us. We're at 9 right now. So we should be able to get all 12. Okay. All right, that's good. So nobody had any objections to this. Do we, Tommy, do you want us to do any drill downs on any of these other, you know, whether major categories of requirements or whether the use cases are representative, anything like that? Should we go ahead and do?
I mean, we can. Having paused each section, I'm assuming there aren't burning objections. Same with the show of hands. So I guess it's more of a open mic because we still have an hour in our allotted time. So if there's anything anyone wants to see in a -01 before a call for adoption versus issuing a call for adoption on the 00 right away, now's the time.
Go ahead, Casey.
I think we're all just pretty excited that we got across the finish line and exhausted. That's all.
Okay, so turning to Ori, our responsible AD, do you have any problems with us actually doing a call for adoption ahead of the next meeting?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. So as your responsible AD, I think it's fair for you to do a call for adoption on the list. You know, typically, I think we have enough time now between now and the next meeting where you should potentially be able to have that complete on time and not have the blackout window or other cutoff dates interfere. But I would check my math on the critical dates section for IETF 124. Just make sure there's nothing on the calendar there. It's also just good for everyone. Remember the cutoff date for new draft submissions is also there. So I have no objections, and I think you should run the call for adoption on the mailing list. And it's awesome to see the document.
The cutoff is October 20th.
Excellent.
Since the queue's empty, I hope you don't mind, chairs, that I give myself the word. I previously flagged that I think it's that we will need to do a better job in positioning the use cases in light of the requirements above. So, so this cutoff date of October 20th that you meant, could you just maybe, and this is also a question for feedback amongst the attendants. The intention of this document is also to be circled among non-IETF attendants who may be less technical. So I wonder how important it is to flesh out the use cases more before we go to a call for adoption, or how much it would be possible to do that shortly after adoption or during the call for adoption. I guess during the call for adoption is bad, shortly after with the work. So yeah, one's question on the process, the other is the question on what do folks think, how much do their description of the use cases need to change in general.
So for the process question, you should leave it alone during the 2-week window for call for adoption. But once the working group document is adopted, it really doesn't become any more set in stone. All it means is the working group has agreed that this is important enough that the working group should own it rather than individuals own it. And it's a sufficiently good starting point that it doesn't have to be torn apart and started from scratch. So there will be plenty of revisions post-adoption and prior to the working group last call, which is the milestone where we believe the text is basically done. In other words, if no one on this call thinks that there should be that there are sufficiently overhauled changes needed, I would say go straight to call for adoption. If it's not ready for adoption, that's when people on the list will say so.
Allison?
I'd like to support the call for adoption now because the intention is very much to make it so that it's worth it for people to start to put their concrete concerns and updates in. That's much harder to do with an individual document. And this allows the working group to work more effectively to own a good baseline document that people feel is a starting point, which is what I think the shows of hands have said about it. And I think you can even attract some attention from people who need to refine the use cases based on the fact that the working group is now going to own this, not a group of individuals. So to me, it's a win-win to call for adoption now, hope that people are comfortable with it, and then be able to start working with it.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to agree that I think it's better handled in the working group, and so we should go for the adoption immediately, and then there will be plenty of time to add whatever the broader group thinks is appropriate at that point.
Okay, so unless anyone here objects to us doing a call for adoption and wants to explain why, I think we've heard plenty of support here. We can spend a little bit of time to talk about whether there's some issues we want to add, whether they're, to go over the one issue that there is on this document. We could do that. We don't have to.
One question I have for authors: are there any changes in the live copy we reviewed today that are not present in the data tracker submitted 00? If so, we'll want you to submit the -01 right away, and we can issue the call for adoption what we reviewed on this call.
Okay. There is maybe one merge request, but it hasn't been actually merged in.
Yeah, if it's just a PR, then it doesn't show up in the editor's copy because the editor's copy uses what's in the default branch.
Right.
And I can do a compare here, but my impression is that this is the same as what was submitted. So.
Okay, cool.
if I can jump in there, maybe. So yes, there is one pull request. I personally would prefer putting the call for adoption before that pull request, because the pull request intends to add some charter definitions by importing them. I mean, I don't want to. Okay, this. I personally think that the charter doesn't do a good job of defining what a digital emblem is.
I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you off right there because I don't want to get into that right now. But
yeah, that's kind of my point too.
All I want to say is we're going to put up for adoption what we reviewed on this call. So
Okay.
If that's with or without the PR, that's the version. So Rohan's doing a diff right now. I do think what we reviewed was the -00 because the working copy will be off the main branch. And that means I can just go push the button.
Yes, yeah, that would have been also my suggestion. My suggestion would have been, let's put the document that we looked at today out for adoption, and let's have the discussion on the PR later.
Okay, there are no substantive changes between what we reviewed today and the 00.
Cool. I'm going to go push the button then.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so seeing as we have a bunch of time left, we can, if folks have things that they think would benefit the document, they want to bring these up here in the call, or they would like to have maybe to create an issue. I don't think that there's any harm in doing this while we're in this adoption call. On the contrary, I feel like having more than the authors write up issues or small PRs, I think shows engagement and interest in the document, which I think is quite useful. Okay. Tommy, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I think it seems we have run out of steam or things for people to say.
I have nothing else. I have pushed the button. The mailing list has received the 2-week call for adoption. Hilariously, it copies the abstract, which is empty. LOL. The call for adoption ends October 15th. Final date for ID submission is the 20th, I think you said, or the 24th, something like this. So in the worst case, we could fast react with the -01 before the meeting. So no, I say we're good.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you on the list, and either in Montreal or remote during IGF 124. No, Alex, unfortunately, we do not know yet during which day we may meet. When the interim agenda comes out, that'll be the first sort of best guess. All right, thank you to everybody, especially the authors of this document. Take care, everybody.